Some have said that religion and government are like a married couple. They may sometimes have a hard time working together, but at the end of the day, they find they cannot live without one another. This can openly be seen in the different ways that the New England colonies were run, or governed, in that there were many views on the relationship between church and state and the role religion had. The role religion played in the different colonies of New England had an impact on the everyday life, governing, and growth of the colonies, leading to the founding of new ones. Now, one may say, how can religion influence something as important as government? Or did it get so big in the first place? Well, it all began when Englishmen came over from England to escape the religious persecution in England. And so in England, there was, if you were not part of the Church of England, you were persecuted, shunned, and not considered a citizen. So there was your right to vote taken away, if you even had it. So the great majority of people left England to find religious freedom So some groups that came over were Puritans and Separatists, because they weren't part of the Anglican Church of England, and other religious groups. And the Pilgrims, which were a Puritan group, landed in Plymouth Colony, or founded Plymouth Colony in 1620. And they were very, very quick to establish a government and a church. So for a government, they signed the Mayflower Compact, which was a set of rules for self-governance, and it was partly a charter government and it was partly a royal government. So they still had their own freedom of religion, however they wanted to do that, away from the Church of England and away from England. But they also were still under the king and the royal people of the time, the monarchy. But they were also quick to establish a church. So the church life was it started out slowly, but it became very strict, where they were very quick to persecute other religions that weren't Puritan or Separatists. So there was already persecution happening, just like in England would have done to them. And there was also very strict about days. So Saturdays afternoon, you would have to face all your thoughts towards God, and you have to stop your leisure activity, stop your work, and stop your trip, everything. Sundays, you would have to go to church for the full day, except for a lunch break in between. And you would have to wear black to signify repentance and sanctify the thought of the individual. And it was just very strict and mandatory. So it got to the point where it was so strict and mandatory that they combined religion and state completely, because there were two big things, so they thought, let's just combine them. So there was a law passed in which only church members could vote. So the right to vote was very important to the colonists, and it was their say. It was how things were run. So in combining the vote, it combined church and state, and so the religion became a very big influential thing in the government as well, and it influenced how things were run, the leaders, and it incorporated Christian morals and viewpoints. So this was great, but there was still persecution happening. So the people that were persecuted and shunned were also taken away from their right to vote if they didn't want to go to church. So there was a man that spoke up against this named Roger Williams. Roger Williams was a minister in Salem who believed that church and state should be separate. And he also believed that the persecution at the time was just wrong. So he spoke up against this, and everybody, or specifically the church leaders, found this as a threat, so they banished him. So in 1636, he was banished because he believed that religious persecution was wrong, and he wanted religious tolerance. Religious tolerance is the respect shown to other religions that are not your own. He also believed that church and state should be separate, because in the combining of church and state, some churches could be, I don't know what the word is, corrupt. Some of the churches could be corrupt. And so he found that it was better if the church and the state were separate. So in his banishment, he went and he founded Rhode Island, or Providence, Rhode Island. And in this, he could establish religious freedom and tolerance and a separation of church and state. So a lot of religious refugees went there, and it was just a place of safety. It started out to be a place with only Christian denominations where you could be religious freedom, and until he even extended it out to Indians and other cultures. So it just became a big place of religious tolerance. And although some colonies agreed with the combining of church and state and the non-combining of church and state, and religious tolerance and religious persecution, at the end of the day, the differences between the colonies did not take away from the point that religion influenced the governments of each colony. The role that religion played in the different colonies of New England had an impact on the everyday life, governing, and growth of the colonies, which led to the founding of new ones.